I think we should start with Jewish pride. The emphasis on Jewish pride, Ge'en Yankiv. That the damage of Golus, after years and years of being oppressed, the Jewish pride was severely damaged. And coming out of Golus demanded the return of Jewish pride. That's funny, famous story about two Jews who were about to be executed, and one of them said Shema Yisrael, and the other one said, Shah, you'll get us in trouble. We were so afraid to show our Jewishness. There was such a lack of pride. And in the bad, terrible days, it was a survival technique. You had to be under the radar. You had to hide. You had to downplay everything, because it was literally dangerous. But to come out of Golus, or to take the Golus out of ourselves, the Rebbe emphasized very strongly the improvement or the increase in Jewish pride. And I think the Rebbe actually said that once, that anyone who does the Mivtzayim and encourages Jewish pride, adds pride in Jewish minds and thinking, is my chassid. That's what I'm all about. So the first point that the Rebbe turned around is that Jews should stop apologizing for being Jewish and to become a little more proud. But this doesn't mean to be proud of the fact that we have a baseball player who's the best pitcher in history, or that we have a singer who's the best singer in history, or we have a politician who runs around the world. What we need is to be proud of our Jewishness, not of some other thing, not even of our great army. So the Six-Day War was a great step in the healing and the return of Jewish pride, but that was only a step in the right direction. It is not yet the true Jewish pride. So Jewish pride would mean proud of our Torah, proud of our history, proud of our ancestors, proud of our customs and minhagim and everything that makes us Jewish. That would be number one. Number two, the Rebbe introduced the idea in subtle ways. There was no dramatics by the Rebbe. The Rebbe introduced the idea that a human being has very few limitations. There is nothing a human being can't do. And he refused to accept the natural restrictions and the shortcomings, the inability. So when somebody said to him, I'm busy all day long, the Rebbe gave him more work to do. Stretch your capacity. There's no limit. You can do more. The superhuman. In general, the Rebbe insisted that we be bigger than ourselves, that we go beyond our limits, beyond our natural inclinations, and that's when we start to live. That's the beginning of our humanity, not the crowning glory, because until you go beyond yourself, you're not really human. You're content with how you were created. That means you haven't contributed anything. You're simply living out the program that you were born with. So unless you go beyond yourself and push yourself where your nature wouldn't take you, where your natural capacities and talents don't go, but you go there out of determination and out of loyalty, that's when you start being a human being. So I think the second point would be that the Rebbe refused to accept limitations. The third thing would be that in our generation and our time, it's not the philosophy, and it's not the faith, and it's not the inner workings of the heart that are essential, although they are important, but the essential thing is the action. So whatever philosophy you have, whatever feelings you have, whatever experiences you have, they're interesting, they're intense, they're exciting, but what action will come of it? Because the main thing is the action. And there are a number of reasons for this, as the Rebbe explained many times, but primarily, since it is our job to change the world, the effect on the world is strongest when you act, when you do something with the world, not so much when you have good intentions, high intentions, great understanding and appreciation of what's right and wrong, but the actual doing is what affects the physical world, and that's where we need to have the effect. So the crucial thing is the action. Somebody said to, the Rebbe said to somebody, when you get back to campus, get your friends to put on tefillin. And this guy said, but the Rebbe, I don't put on tefillin. And the Rebbe said, that's not their fault. Why should they suffer? Now, you could say, if a guy doesn't put on tefillin himself, but tells others to do it, that's the height of hypocrisy. Totally unacceptable. Put on tefillin yourself first before you preach to others. The Rebbe didn't see it that way, because hypocrisy is an internal condition, which may or may not be healthy. The internal condition. Hypocrisy is not healthy. But what's happening on the inside is not as crucial as what is happening on the outside. So if your friends will put on tefillin because you encourage them, that is far more significant than whether you are or are not hypocritical. So we don't even go into the question of it. Is it hypocritical or not? Even if it is, if your friends will put on tefillin, that will be a great accomplishment worth everything. From there, we go naturally to another point that the Rebbe made, and that is that our generation is the one that will succeed in bringing godliness down to earth. We've been doing this for 3,000 years since the giving of the Torah. God came down to Har Sinai, gave us the Torah, and we are supposed to bring godliness the rest of the way down, like off the mountain down to earth. So for 3,000 years, that's what we've been doing. But our generation, the Rebbe said, is the one that's going to finally bring it down to earth. Because between heaven and earth, there are many, many layers and levels. It's come down quite a distance, but not completely. It's like after the giving of the Torah, when God came down to Mount Sinai and actually wrote the commandments on a physical stone and so on, we still needed to build a Mishkan in order to have God really be present in the physical. So making the Mishkan was the beginning. One place, one location, one geographical spot became godly. Our job is that every place should be godly, and we are the generation that is meant to do that. Another concept that the Rebbe popularized, which may not be completely original, but it certainly was given a lot of exposure by the Rebbe, and that is that a single mitzvah, even if it is not followed by another mitzvah, is infinitely valuable. Somebody called it the philosophy of the partial mitzvah. If, for example, you light Shabbos candles in honor of Shabbos, but then you don't really keep Shabbos properly, the lighting of the candles is infinitely valuable. If you don't mix meat and milk, but you don't really keep kosher, infinitely valuable. And the thought behind it, the reasoning behind it is, if you do me a favor, you do for me something that I really enjoy, appreciate, need, and it's the only thing you do for me, is that valuable? Is that significant? Is that meaningful? Of course it is. You did something for me. I would like you to do more. And hopefully you will. And if you enjoy doing this favor for me, maybe you will do another favor. But how can you dismiss somebody doing you a favor, going out of their way for you, just because they don't do it often enough? So does God appreciate a mitzvah from someone who is not committed full-time to performing mitzvahs? If you think of a mitzvah as doing for God what God asks, or what God enjoys, or what God needs, well, it's infinitely valuable, even if you do one mitzvah your whole life. So getting a Jew to put on tefillin without asking him to commit to all 613 mitzvahs is infinitely meaningful. The Rebbe had to make that argument because not everybody sees it that way. But it's certainly one of the strong points that the Rebbe made. Along the same lines, in terms of understanding the Torah itself, the study of Torah, we know that there are different aspects of Torah. There's the halacha, the do's and the don'ts, thou shalt or thou shalt not. There's the discussion, the debate around the halacha. Under what circumstances do you do the mitzvah? Who is obligated to do the mitzvah? What if you forgot to do the mitzvah? How do you make up for it? That's basically the oral law. The Talmud, the Mishnah, the Gemara. Of course, there's also the written Torah, the 5 books. Then there are commentaries. So there are so many aspects of the revealed part of Torah, and then we get to the mystical parts of Torah, to the Kabbalah and the Zohar and the Arizal. For many, many years, the different aspects of Torah were studied in very limited, compartmentalized fashion. Those who studied Kabbalah treated it like a special subject. It was different, distinct from anything else. Those who specialized in halacha didn't really study Kabbalah much. They were divided parts of Torah. The Rebbe made Torah a single unit. Everything in the Kabbalah is reflected in the Gemara, and everything in Gemara has a Kabbalistic origin. The Rebbe united all the aspects of Torah into one comprehensive teaching. What the Gemara doesn't explain is explained in the Kabbalah, in the Zohar. What the Zohar doesn't give you, the Gemara gives you, and so on. So that taken together as a single unit, the Torah is complete. And the Rebbe's slogan was, one Torah, one God, one nation. Which leads us to another point. The appreciation and the respect and the love and devotion to every individual Jew. You hear people who are activists, who do very good things, very good projects, but they're always speaking about Klal Yisrael. We have to do this for Klal Yisrael, for the Jewish people. You hardly ever hear about the individual Mr. Yisrael or Mrs. Yisrael. It's always Klal Yisrael. So any project that doesn't affect the entire people doesn't seem to be worth the effort. By the Rebbe, the individual was as significant as the collective, as the total, and the total was as significant as the individual. Again, a rejection of division, separation, distinctions. Because in emes, all things are true. If you're talking about the truth of what a Jew is, it is true of an individual Jew just as it is of the people. You may see it more in the people than in the individual. But if it's not in the individual, then how do the people get it? If you have 10 bad people, how can you have a good minion? You have a minion of bad people, you got a bad minion. So how can you say the minion is great, the individuals are not? So if the Jewish people is great, and you're willing to work for the Jewish people and worry about the survival of the Jewish people and continuity of the Jewish people, you have to appreciate the infinite value of each individual that makes up the Jewish people. Let's see what else we have on our list here. If we really want to fulfill God's purpose in creation, shockingly, it is not enough that every Jew become a saint. If every Jew in the world became a perfect Jew, fulfilling all 613 mitzvahs to perfection, the world would not be what God needs it to be. Because there are other people in the world. 7 billion people. And until all 7 billion people recognize God, the world is not the way God wants it to be. And we were actually given a responsibility to be a light to the nations, not only by modeling our faith in God, devotion to God and His commandments. We actually have an obligation to influence, convince, and bring all people to serving God collectively. And that's why the description of the ultimate, the world in its perfection after Mashiach comes, the description that we have in the Oleinu, at the end of every tefillah, at the end of every prayer and every davening of every day of the year, the description is, all the people of the world will serve you and recognize you, meaning God. So we actually have an obligation to influence the rest of the world as well. Obviously, it's an impossible task. There are only 15 or 16 million Jews, and there are 7 billion people. So it's not a project that you can actually undertake in terms of individuals. We can't teach individuals, but wherever we have the opportunity to influence non-Jewish leaders, non-Jewish thinkers, non-Jewish writers, the people who create the culture and the values, we should use those opportunities to introduce Torah concepts that are universal, that are meant for all people. I had the occasion once to be on BBC. They have this 5-minute message that goes out to 800 million people. Still not 7 billion, but 800 million is quite a number. And this was back then, maybe it's more greater now. And the technician there was mumbling to himself about how people come and think that they can say something in 5 minutes that's going to be relevant to 800 million people of different cultures, different languages, different places. And that it was preposterous. Now, just that week, the Rebbe had mentioned that it would be a great idea that every school, every company, every factory, every group of workers, at the end of the week when they get paid, the company or the school or the factory should give its workers a symbolic dollar, an additional dollar, to be given to charity, and encouraged to add some of their own money as well. So the idea being, you just got your paycheck, now you have what to eat? Think of someone else. Think of those who don't have what to eat. So that's what I mentioned. I quoted the Rebbe on this, and this technician, I don't know about the other 800 million people, but this one guy said, wow, I think you did it. That's relevant, that's meaningful, that is significant to whoever is going to hear this. Don't have to limit it to 800 million. It can be everybody. So the Rebbe's responsibility, taking responsibility for the whole world, and expecting that of us as well. This is something original. It's been a long time since Jewish leaders had the vision to be able to think of the rest of the world, not only of Jewish survival. When it comes to Jewish survival, like peace in Israel, the Rebbe's demand was that we treat the subject from a traditional Jewish value perspective and not from a political perspective. Because politics, as we all know, is false. Torah is true. And so the Rebbe's approach was appeasement, playing politics with Jewish lives is unacceptable. Our commitment, our responsibility, the government's responsibility in Israel, primarily, first and foremost, is the safety of its citizens, not peace in the region. When you've assured the safety of your citizens, then you can talk peace. But peace at the expense of a single Jewish life, not acceptable. Now you can call that Jewish pride, you can call that loyalty to Jewish values and Torah, you can call that a traditional approach, whatever you want to call it. The Rebbe's demand and insistence that every time you compromise, every time you cheat on your own values, thinking that that's going to make everybody else happy, has proven to be a failure every time. So the Rebbe's attitude is to take a Jewish stance. We have our obligations, we have our Torah, we have our instructions from our sages, from God, from the Torah, and that's how we behave. And if we said that to the world would respect it much more than insisting that we are a democracy and we're the only democracy in the Middle East. The Middle East is not impressed. The Middle East will be impressed if we speak in the name of God and act in a godly fashion and put value and truth above politics. One more subject. People would write to the Rebbe about physical health, ailments, problems, and the Rebbe would say often, check your mezuzah. Make sure the mezuzah on your door is kosher. Make sure that every door has a mezuzah, except for the bathroom. In other words, every door that needs a mezuzah halachically should have a mezuzah, and the mezuzah should be kosher. Writing a mezuzah is a very exact and precise art, and if you don't do it right, then it's not a mezuzah, and it doesn't have the holiness of the mezuzah, and it doesn't have the effect of the mezuzah. Now the obvious question is, the person wrote to the Rebbe that his leg hurts, he's got backache, he's got problems with his vision or with his heart, and the Rebbe says, check your mezuzah. How are we supposed to understand that? One of the Rebbe's themes is that the spiritual and the physical are not separate. They're not two different truths. They're a continuum. Everything begins spiritually. Everything starts in God, for example, and then it devolves until it takes on physical form. If something is incomplete, unhealthy, or unwholesome in the physical, you got to trace it back to its origins, and that is in a less physical, in the more metaphysical. As for example, how many ailments are what doctors call stress-related? Your back hurts? There's nothing wrong with your back. You have too much stress. You're getting headaches, migraines? We checked your head. There's nothing wrong there, but you have too much stress. So stress is a metaphysical thing, and yet it's affecting the body. It's the psychosomatic effect. But the psychosomatic is only part of the story. It's not just your thinking, it's also your soul. It's also what's going on deeper than your conscious thoughts. All of these things have an effect. So the Rebbe, being holistic, went to the source of the problem and insisted that we understand and that we appreciate that body and soul may be very different in their natures, but they are interdependent, and one affects the other. An unhealthy body disturbs the soul, and a soul that is not interested in the body will not provide the body with what it needs. A body that refuses to accept its soul is going to have ailments. So the healthy relationship between body and soul is a necessary part of life and health. But that's true on all levels, not only body and soul. How you make a living, how your business functions, it also has a soul and a body. In order for the body to be successful, the soul has to be healthy. So your business has to be moral and honest and the way God wants. And then God will give you the blessings that He wants to give you, no matter how hard you work or how much overtime you put in. If you run a decent business, you've created the vehicle for which God can provide for you, and God will provide a lot or a little, depending on what you actually need to fulfill your purpose in life. So, here's the Rebbe's message. How you make a living and why you live at all in the first place cannot be separated. They shouldn't be separated. So you see that in many of these things there's a common thread, a common theme. No separation. No separation between Jew and Jew. No separation between one part of Torah and another. No separation between body and soul. No separation between creator and creation. The ultimate point of everything is the oneness. A universe, not a chaotic world. Let's see what else we have here. The emphasis on Mashiach. We already mentioned that we are the generation that is supposed to bring godliness down to earth finally after all these years. Bringing godliness down to earth, obviously, would make the world and humanity godly. Not only good, but godly. What is Mashiach? Mashiach is the descendant of King David, who is the royal family in Jewish history. Mashiach will, as our king, guide us, teach us, and inspire us in the new way of living once evil has disappeared. So what we're saying when we talk about Mashiach is that we're looking for a time, we're impatient for a time when God's world will be a godly world as He intended it. So when we talk about Mashiach, we're simply saying the world as it is not acceptable. It's got to get better than this. Much better. And we are actually promised that there will be a time when Mashiach will come and the world will be what it is meant to be. We're just impatient for it to happen, and we know who is going to guide us in that transformation. So it's not a matter of believing in Mashiach, it's a matter of preparing the world so that the world can be, under Mashiach's leadership, the world as it was intended to be when God created it.